Welcome back to the Vanity Sports Podcast. I'm Joey Dwyer, and you don't like to make generalizations in April, but when news like this happens, it's hard not to. Tyrin Lawrence has entered the transfer portal. Would have been Vanderbilt's best player next year, would have been Vanderbilt's alpha scorer. Was Vanderbilt's alpha scorer for a lot of the second half of the season, and he's in the portal now, and I don't know how you replace him if you're Vanderbilt. Certainly news that you don't like to hear, and it felt like Vanderbilt kind of had this roster going in a positive direction after landing Evan Taylor. You had Ezra Monyon, Tyrin Lawrence, Taylor, and Smith, and then you just had to get a big from the portal to fill that gap in the front court. You got a really good starting five, but now you lose your best player, and if you lose your best player in April, really hard to replace, especially at a school like Vanderbilt that's really got its hands tied in the portal. It's really hard to get an alpha scorer, and now Tyrin Lawrence in the portal. I don't really know how you do that. Vanderbilt has the academic stuff against it. It has the NIL stuff against it. And the development plan for this program has always been, you get a guy like Tyrin Lawrence who maybe a little slept on out of high school. He comes in and develops like he had, and he's your guy. Now he's gone. And this isn't just the Tyrin Lawrence goes to the portal issue. It's a infrastructure issue. It feels like Vanderbilt needed this type of guy to stay in the program and be its guy, and that can't happen now, and it feels season altering. This late in the portal cycle, losing your best player feels unbelievably detrimental, especially with a team that didn't feel all that deep in the first place. In the backcourt, really all you look at now is Ezra Monyon, Paul Lewis, and Isaiah West, and then maybe Malik Presley can slide down to the two. But man, there's really no veterans in that backcourt outside of Monyon. There's really not a guy you turn to and say, go get me a bucket on this roster now. Maybe Evan Taylor steps into a bigger role than we originally anticipated, but it felt like he was a guy who could have come in and played off of that backcourt that would have been one of the better backcourts in the SEC with Lawrence and Monyon. At this age of college basketball, though, you can't take any of that for granted, and you can't expect any of that to actually amount to anything. And Tyrin Lawrence's transfer shows you that. Felt like Lawrence. I think we'd heard some rumblings of this for a few weeks or at least a few days, but man, just an entry that Vanderbilt really is going to struggle to bounce back from, and they're going to have to find a difference maker or two now in the portal again. It felt like as we entered the portal cycle, even with Jordan Wright entering, it felt like Vanderbilt just needed one or two complementary pieces to that backcourt. Now you need a best player, and I don't know where that comes from. Ezra Monyon's a good player. Should he be the number one scoring option on an SEC team? Probably not. That's why Tyrin Lawrence is on this roster. That's why Tyrin Lawrence was getting those big minutes, and that's why Jerry Stackhouse gave him so much freedom to kind of make things happen on his own. But now he's in the portal, and Vanderbilt needs answers. And if it doesn't, that's 5 years in a row without the NCAA tournament under Jerry Stackhouse. And again, you look for answers again. Right now, this roster isn't good enough to make the NCAA tournament. Frankly, it feels like you need a big, which was the question. You have 3 open scholarships. You probably needed a big or two with those. Now you just need anybody who can come in and be a legitimate number one scorer, and it's really hard to find that in the portal this late, especially at Vanderbilt, especially with the way the NIL is structured at Vanderbilt, especially with the way the academic stuff is structured with Vanderbilt. They're picking from a really limited pool, and they really couldn't afford something like this to happen. Just, again, feels like a complete disaster here with the timing of Lawrence going in the portal and just the caliber of player Lawrence is going in the portal, especially with the lack of depth on this roster. It felt like the backcourt was the one spot where you felt really comfortable with Monyon, Lawrence, Lewis, West. Now there's going to be a guy playing out of position at the 2. I think West will probably play the 2, but it feels like West was probably more of a 1, at least in, I guess he's a true combo guard, but I'd rather him play the 1 than the 2 probably at the SEC level. But I don't even know what to do if you're Vanderbilt. I mean, the portal is just completely decimated this roster, and I've been one of the guys that had preached don't panic. It's still early in the cycle. Turned out early in the cycle, probably it could get worse. And it has gotten worse for Vanderbilt. Miles Studi's gone. Jordan Wright's gone. They don't have a big man, and now they don't have a best player. Well, I guess they have a best player in Ezra Manjon, but that's a guy who should be surrounded by shooters and a guy who should be surrounded by other guys he can run the pick and roll with and other good players. And that's not to say Vanderbilt can't get other good players and maybe build a team that's better than the sum of its parts, but man, what a brutal loss for this team, and one that feels like it could define its season if the rest of the portal cycle doesn't go Vanderbilt's way, if the rest of the high school cycle doesn't go its way. Really calls into question kind of how you want to do things here too, because it's a good development model to bring in high school guys who are a little under-recruited, have them get better and grow old together, but you got to really think about whether that's possible in this age of college basketball, and I'm not sure that it is. If you don't have the NIL money to keep these guys around, if you don't have, if you don't win enough games to want to keep these guys around, there's so much roster turnover in college basketball nowadays that it feels like if you have a guy like Tyrin Lawrence who's good enough, he might go elsewhere. And maybe Lawrence had extenuating circumstances being from Georgia. Maybe there's other things in play here, but it just feels like this could become a common theme. Like maybe if Vandy gets a good recruit, he has a nice season, and then goes and hits the portal immediately, you call into question where this program's at and whether you can actually build the way you used to be able to build. I think it's a good model on paper, but I mean, this calls it all into question. So not to say that can't be done, because if you can get the right guys and get them to buy in to stay for 4 years, that's something different. But with Lawrence going into the portal, it calls in a lot of things to question. And not only for next year's roster, but just in terms of how this thing is being built. And I think Stackhouse has done the best he can with the players he's gotten, but at some point, there's got to be a way for him to get more talent in the door, and it feels like one of his least talented teams on paper right now. Going into next season, it felt like one of the better teams he had on paper going in with Lawrence, but he's just that much of a difference maker to where he could go out and get you 20, 25 a night, maybe not a night, but on any given night, and be that guy. Look at Kentucky, look at the SEC tournament against LSU where he had 25. Feels like every game down the stretch of the second half, Tyrin Lawrence was the guy for this team, and you saw it happen against Alabama without him. I'm not to say that that'll happen every game without him, or he was the only reason they lost that game so badly, but kind of puts into perspective how good Tyrin Lawrence was for this team, and I think he was almost underratedly good. He was the guy down the stretch without Liam Robbins, and when Tyrin Lawrence didn't have it, this team didn't have it against Texas A&M. So there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to think about moving forward. But right now, you look at this roster and you got to plug some holes in the portal. You got 3 open scholarships, and you have 3 guys who are probably guaranteed starters right now in Ezra Manjon, Evan Taylor, and Colin Smith. The rest, it's up to whoever to step into those roles, and it's up to Jerry Stackhouse to fill those roles in the portal. I'm sure this is not how he wanted to build this team, though, which is completely through the portal. I feel like he wanted to build this team largely with guys returning, and that just wasn't the case for this team. And we'll see if it comes back to bite him, but it certainly feels like this could be a turning point in the offseason, one from optimism last week where you felt great about getting Evan Taylor as a complimentary piece. You felt great about Malik Presley as an upside play. Now, all that really feels like goes out the window. Those are good players. Those are good additions, but that momentum is killed, and Vanderbilt needs something. And I don't know who that would be. Vanderbilt hasn't reached out to guys near the level of Lawrence in the portal, and a lot of those guys who they did reach out to near that level are gone, are committed. And man, what a brutal turn of events for Vanderbilt at this point in the cycle. I don't know where you go from here, but it feels like it's got to be answers quickly. Otherwise, the NCAA tournament feels like a dream. And it felt like a dream early in the season last year, so that's not to say they can't turn it around, but there's a lot that's got to improve before then. So thank you guys for watching. We'll have you updated on where the rest of this roster pans out and who they try to get to fill that role. But for now, not good. Thank you guys for watching. God bless. Hope everyone has a good Monday, and peace.